The burlap sack hit the ground with a thud, and Kestrel Windwalker's massive hands froze on the rope binding. Inside, something moved, not the thrashing of a wild animal he'd expected, but the deliberate shift of human limbs. His bronze fingers trembled as he loosened the knot, his heart hammering against his ribs like war drums. "Please, take them off," came a voice so soft it might have been the wind through canyon walls. Kestrel's breath caught. The voice belonged to a woman, and not just any woman. As the sack fell away, revealing a cascade of copper-gold hair and eyes the color of sage honey, he stumbled backward as if struck by lightning. She sat bound and gagged, her calico dress torn, but her spirit unbroken, those impossible eyes fixed on his with neither fear nor hatred, but something far more dangerous, curiosity. He knew that face, had dreamed of it for 3 moons running, since glimpsing her outside Gideon's general store in Willow Creek. She was Magnolia Thornfield, the preacher's daughter who'd arrived from back east to tend her ailing aunt, the woman whose laugh had haunted his nights and whose gentle way with children had made even the hardest men in town tip their hats. "Myrta," Kestrel whispered, the Spanish curse falling from his lips as he realized the catastrophic mistake. His cousin Joaquin had said there was a bounty on some eastern woman, causing trouble for the railroad men, a woman with fire-red hair who'd been organizing the farmers against the land grabs. But this wasn't that woman. "This was you," Magnolia said once he'd removed her gag, her voice steady despite her circumstances. "You're the one who brings horses to old Henrik's ranch." Kestrel nodded mutely, his usual commanding presence crumbling like adobe in a flash flood. At 6 feet and 7 inches, with shoulders broad enough to block doorways and arms corded with muscle, from years of breaking wild mustangs, he'd never felt small. But under Magnolia's unwavering gaze, he felt like a boy caught stealing apples. "There's been a mistake," he managed, his English careful and precise despite the chaos in his head. "I was supposed to kidnap someone else." Magnolia shifted, testing her bonds. "Well, that's reassuring." The irony in her voice should have stung, but instead it sent warmth spreading through his chest. Most women in Willow Creek either cowered from him or looked through him entirely. The few who acknowledged his existence did so with the cold calculation of those measuring a dangerous animal. But Magnolia spoke to him as if he were simply a man who'd made an error in judgment. Hitch, he supposed, he had. "I'll take you back," he said quickly, reaching for his knife to cut her bonds. "Right now. I'll explain to your father." "Wait." Her command stopped him cold. "Before you do anything else, tell me, why did they want me taken?" Kestrel hesitated. The truth was ugly. Joaquin had been hired by railroad men who thought Magnolia was Scarlet O'Malley, the firebrand organizer stirring up trouble to counties over. But looking at her now, this gentle creature who'd never raised her voice above a whisper in church, he couldn't imagine how anyone could mistake her for a rabble-rouser. "They thought you were someone else," he said finally, "someone causing problems for the railroad." Magnolia's laugh was like silver bells in morning air. "Problems for the railroad? Me?" She looked down at her bound hands, then back at him with those devastating eyes. "I suppose there's more than one way to cause problems, isn't there?" And in that moment, watching the sunset paint gold highlights in her hair, Kestrel Windwalker knew his life had just taken a turn more dramatic than any wild bronco could manage. The adobe cabin sat hidden in a fold of red rock canyon, invisible, unless you knew exactly where to look. Kestrel had built it himself during the lonely years after his return from the cavalry, a place where he could disappear when the weight of existing between 2 worlds became too much. Now, as he helped Magnolia down from his paint horse, he wondered if bringing her here was the biggest mistake of his life or the most necessary thing he'd ever done. "It's beautiful," she said, studying the way he'd carved wooden shutters to frame the windows and trained morning glory vines over the doorway. "You built this yourself?" "See, yes." He found himself switching languages when nervous, a habit that had earned him plenty of grief in his cavalry days. "It's not much, but it's safe. No one knows about this place except the people who hired you to kidnap railroad troublemakers." Kestrel winced. "Joaquin is my cousin, but we don't see eye to eye on much. He rides with men who," He struggled for words that wouldn't damn his own blood. Men who take money for things that should never be done. Inside the cabin, Magnolia moved with surprising comfort, examining his hand-carved furniture and the books stacked beside his bed. "Cervantes," she said, lifting Don Quixote in Spanish. "You read Spanish literature?" "My mother was from Sonora. She taught me to read before." He stopped. The story of his mother's death at the hands of Apache raiders who'd mistaken her for an enemy was not one for a woman he'd just kidnapped, regardless of the circumstances. Before what? Magnolia's voice had gone soft, the way it did when she comforted crying children at church. Before she died, the words came out harsher than intended. "The Apache took her when I was 12. He expected her to recoil, to remember suddenly that he was half Apache himself, that the same blood that had killed his mother ran in his veins. Instead, she sat down at his rough-hewn table and folded her hands. And yet you kept her language, her books, they were all I had left of her." "No," Magnolia said quietly. "You had her love for learning, her appreciation for beauty. Look at this place. Every detail speaks of someone who sees the world as she must have seen it." Kestrel stared at her. In 5 minutes, this woman had understood something about him that he'd spent years trying to understand himself. The contradiction that had driven him from the Apache bands who claimed him as a son and the white settlements, that tolerated him only because of his usefulness with horses. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" The question escaped before he could stop it. Magnolia considered this seriously. "Should I be? Most people think so. Most people haven't seen the way you gentle horses that other men would beat into submission." She gestured toward the window, where his paint horse grazed peacefully beside a cream-colored mare. "Brutality leaves marks, Kestrel, but everything you touch seems to become more than it was before." Heat rose in his chest, a feeling so foreign he almost didn't recognize it as hope. "You've watched me work, every Tuesday when you bring horses to Henrik. I help Aunt Cordelia with her sewing on the porch." A flush crept up her neck. "I may have positioned my chair to have a better view of the corral." The admission hung between them like morning mist, delicate and transformative. Kestrel found himself moving closer, drawn by something more powerful than gravity. "Magnolia, I need to tell you something about why they really wanted you taken. I know." Her voice was steady. "I figured it out when you mentioned the railroad. They think I'm Scarlett O'Malley." Kestrel blinked. "You know about Scarlett O'Malley?" "I know about her because I am her." The words hit him like a physical blow. "What?" Magnolia stood, and suddenly her gentle demeanor shifted, revealing steel beneath silk. "Magnolia Thornfield is the preacher's niece who reads to children and helps old women with their mending. But Scarlett O'Malley is the woman who's been organizing farmers to stand against the railroad's land grabs. 2 different names, 2 different lives. Same person." Kestrel felt the world tilt sideways. "But you're sweet, innocent, helpless." Her smile held an edge sharp enough to cut glass. "The best disguise is always the truth, Kestrel. I am gentle. I do love children and literature and beautiful sunsets. But I also believe that people have the right to keep their homes. And I'm willing to fight for that belief." Outside, thunder rumbled across the canyon, promising one of the desert's violent storms. Inside the cabin, Kestrel stared at the woman who'd just revealed herself to be everything he'd never dared to dream of: beautiful, intelligent, brave, and dangerous as dynamite. "So," he said slowly, "when they figure out they got the right woman after all, they'll come for me with everything they have." Magnolia moved to the window, watching lightning fork across the darkening sky. "The question is, are you going to help them? Or are you going to help me?" The storm hit the canyon like God's own fury, turning the normally dry creek into a raging torrent and the sky into a battlefield of lightning and thunder. Kestrel stood at the window, watching water pour from the roof in silver sheets, while behind him Magnolia Scarlet, whatever name fit the complex woman, who'd turned his world upside down, calmly prepared coffee over the fire. "You don't seem worried," he observed, noting how steady her hands remained despite the fact that both their lives hung in the balance. "Worry is wasted energy." She poured coffee into 2 tin cups, the domestic gesture at odds with the revolutionary she'd revealed herself to be. "I learned that from watching my father prepare sermons." He'd worry and pace and tear his hair out until the moment he stepped into the pulpit. Then he'd become someone else entirely calm, certain, powerful. And which are you now? The preacher's daughter or the revolutionary? Both. Always both. She handed him the coffee, her fingers brushing his with an electric touch that had nothing to do with the lightning outside. The question is, which are you going to be? The man who works for money or the man who follows his conscience? Kestrel wrapped his large hands around the cup, feeling the warmth seep into his fingers. You don't understand what you're asking. Joaquin isn't just my cousin, he's all the family I have left, and the men he works for. He shook his head. They don't forgive betrayal. No. Magnolia said softly, they don't, but they also don't. Stop. If you give me back to them now, do you think they'll simply let you walk away? You've seen my face, heard my real name. You know too much. The truth of her words hit him like cold water. He'd been so focused on the immediate problem of having kidnapped the wrong woman that he hadn't considered the larger implications. Men like Fletcher Kane, the railroad boss who'd hired Joaquin, didn't leave loose ends. They'll kill us both, he said, the realization settling over him like a shroud. Unless we kill them first. Kestrel nearly dropped his coffee. What? Not murder. She clarified quickly. But we destroy their operation. I've been gathering evidence of their illegal land grabs. For months, forged documents, intimidation, bribery. Everything I need to bring them down legally. Her eyes blazed with determination. The problem has been getting the evidence to someone with the power to act on it. Like who? The territorial governor is coming through Willow Creek next week for the Harvest Festival. If I can get those documents to him personally, it would end Fletcher Kane's operation entirely. Kestrel finished, understanding dawning. But the evidence, where is it? Magnolia's expression shifted, becoming almost apologetic. Hidden in the church bell tower. I've been using my position as the preacher's niece to collect information during social calls and ladies' auxiliary meetings. Amazing what people will say in front of someone they consider harmless. Outside, the storm raged with increasing fury, but inside the cabin, Kestrel felt a strange calm settling over him. For the first time since his mother's death, he could see a path forward that didn't require him to compromise his soul or deny half of his heritage. There's something you need to know about me, he said, meeting her gaze directly. The Apache who killed my mother. I rode with the cavalry to hunt them down. Spent 3 years tracking my own people, fighting my own blood. Did you find them? Yes. The word came out like broken glass. And when I did, I couldn't pull the trigger, couldn't kill men who looked like my uncle, like my grandfather. The colonel called it cowardice, said I was a half-breed who couldn't be trusted. What do you call it? Kestrel was quiet for a long moment, listening to the thunder roll across the canyon. I call it the day I learned that revenge doesn't heal wounds, it just makes new ones. Magnolia set down her cup and moved closer, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she used, could see the gold flecks in her green eyes. Then, you already know that what we're planning isn't revenge, it's justice. Justice. He tested the word, finding it fit better than he'd expected. And after, if we survive this, if we stop Kane and his men, what then? Her smile was radiant as sunrise over the desert. Then we figure out if a reformed horse thief and a revolutionary preacher's daughter can build something beautiful together. I never stole horses, he protested, surprising himself by almost smiling. No, but you stole me. And despite the circumstances, I find I don't want to be returned. The thunder crashed overhead, shaking the cabin walls, but Kestrel barely noticed. All his attention was focused on the woman before him, brave, brilliant, beautiful, and somehow, impossibly, looking at him as if he were the answer to prayers he'd never dared to pray. Magnolia, he said, her name a whisper on his lips. Scarlet, she corrected, then added more softly. But when this is over, when we're safe, I want to be Magnolia again. I want to be both. I want to be everything I am, with someone who can see all of me. I see you, he said, reaching up to touch her cheek. All of you. And I want to help you become everything you're meant to be. When she kissed him, soft and sure, the storm outside seemed to quiet, as if the whole world were holding its breath. Dawn broke clear and violent, painting the canyon walls in shades of blood and gold. Kestrel had been awake for hours, watching Magnolia sleep curled in his bed while he kept vigil from the chair by the window. She'd trusted him enough to rest, and that trust felt more precious than any treasure he could imagine. The sound of horses approaching shattered the morning quiet. "Magnolia." His voice was urgent, but controlled. "We have company." She was awake instantly, alert as a wild thing sensing danger. "How many?" "3 riders, coming from the east." She joined him at the window, studying the approaching figures through the morning haze. "That's Joaquin in front. I recognize his horse from town. You know Joaquin?" "I know everyone in Willow Creek, remember, part of being the helpful preacher's niece." Her voice held a grim edge. "He's riding with Cain's men Brutus McKenna and that snake oil salesman, Cornelius Vex." Kestrel's jaw tightened. McKenna had a reputation for cruelty that extended far beyond a normal criminal enterprise, and Vex was known for his silver tongue and complete lack of conscience. "They're not here to negotiate." "Then we don't negotiate." Magnolia moved away from the window with purposeful strides. "How well do you know this canyon?" "Like the back of my hand. I've hunted every inch of it." "Good. Because I have a plan, but it requires you to trust me completely." She turned to face him, and he saw Scarlett O'Malley looking out through Magnolia's eyes, the revolutionary who'd been outmaneuvering railroad thugs for months. "Can you do that?" The question hung between them, weighted with everything unspoken. Trust meant more than just believing in her plan. It meant choosing her over his cousin, over the familiarity of old loyalties, over the safety of staying neutral. "Yes," he said simply. Relief flickered across her features. "Then listen carefully. In about 10 minutes, you're going to walk out that door with your hands visible and greet your cousin like nothing's changed. You're going to tell him I escaped during the storm." "Magnolia." "Scarlett," she corrected firmly. "Right now, I'm Scarlett, and Scarlett has been expecting this moment." She moved to a loose floorboard near the fireplace, prying it up to reveal a hidden compartment. Inside were a Colt revolver, ammunition, and what looked like dynamite. "You came prepared," Kestrel observed, impressed despite his concern. "I've been preparing for war since the day I arrived in Willow Creek." She checked a revolver. "With practiced efficiency." The question was always whether I'd be fighting alone. Outside, the horses had stopped. Voices carried on the morning air, Joaquin calling out a greeting in Spanish, McKenna's rough laughter, Vex's cultured tones discussing breakfast. "What do you need me to do?" Kestrel asked. "Keep them talking. Get them off their horses and away from their weapons if possible. I'll circle around through the rocks and get into position." She holstered the gun beneath her torn calico dress, the weapon disappearing completely. "When you hear my signal." "What signal?" Her smile was sharp as winter starlight. "You'll know it when you hear it." She moved toward the back window with fluid grace, then paused. "Kestrel, when this is over, I want you to know that last night what we shared, it wasn't just circumstance or desperation." "I know," he said, though hearing the words still sent warmth through his chest. "And if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you." His voice carried absolute conviction. "I won't let it." She studied his face, reading something there that satisfied her. "No, I don't think you will." Then she was gone, slipping through the window like smoke, leaving him alone with the weight of the most important performance of his life. Kestrel holstered his own weapon, ran a hand through his dark hair, and stepped outside to face his cousin. "Joaquin," he called out in Spanish, allowing genuine pleasure to color his voice. "What brings you to my canyon so early?" Joaquin dismounted, his movements easy and familiar. At first glance, they could have been cousins meeting for a friendly visit, two men who shared blood and history, comfortable in each other's presence. But Kestrel noticed how McKenna and Vex remained mounted, hands near their weapons. "We came to collect your prisoner, Primo," Joaquin replied in English, his tone light but his eyes watchful. "Mr. Cain is eager to speak with the troublesome Miss O'Malley." "Ah." Kestrel scratched his jaw, playing the part of a man with unwelcome news. "About that, she's gone, isn't she?" McKenna's voice was flat, dangerous. "The storm," Kestrel said with a shrug. "I'd tied her in the storage shed, figuring she'd be secure there. But the creek rose faster than I expected, flooded everything. When I went to check on her this morning," he gestured helplessly, You're telling us she drowned? Vex leaned forward in his saddle, pale eyes sharp with suspicion. I'm telling you she's gone. Whether she drowned or escaped in the confusion, I can't say. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Kestrel counted heartbeats, waiting for Magnolia's signal, praying his performance was convincing enough to buy her the time she needed. Then Joaquin smiled, and Kestrel knew they were in trouble. That's a good story, primo. Very believable, except for one small problem. His cousin's hand moved to his gun. We saw smoke from your chimney this morning, and unless you've taken to making coffee for drowned women, the canyon erupted in an explosion that shook the ground beneath their feet. The explosion came from the direction of the creek, where Magnolia had apparently used her hidden dynamite to bring down a section of canyon wall. The thunderous crash echoed off stone surfaces, multiplying into a roar that seemed to come from everywhere at once. In the chaos that followed, several things happened simultaneously. McKenna's horse reared in terror, throwing him hard against the rocky ground. Vex fought to control his own mount, cursing in languages that would have made a sailor blush. And Joaquin, instead of drawing his weapon, threw himself sideways as a rifle shot cracked from the rocks above, sending up a spray of dust where he'd been standing. She's up there, Vex shouted, pointing toward a ledge 30 feet above the cabin. The girl's alive. Kestrel used the confusion to his advantage, diving behind the water trough as more shots rang out. He could see muzzle flashes from at least 2 different positions in the rocks. Magnolia had been busy during her brief absence. Joaquin, he called out in Spanish. This doesn't have to end badly between us. It already has. Primo, his cousin, had found cover behind a boulder, his voice tight with anger. You chose the girl over family. I chose right over wrong. Same thing. McKenna, despite his fall, had managed to retrieve his rifle and was now sending shots toward the ledge where Magnolia had last been seen. She's making fools of us all, but the return fire had stopped. Kestrel frowned, scanning the rocks above for any sign of movement. Where was she? His answer came in the form of a rope dropping from an overhang directly behind Vex's position. Magnolia rappelled down with the fluid grace of someone who'd been climbing canyon walls since childhood, landing silently on the rocks behind the mounted man. Mr. Vex, she said politely, pressing her revolver against the base of his skull. Please dismount slowly and keep your hands where I can see them. Vex's face went white as winter snow. Now see here, miss, it's Mrs., she corrected pleasantly. Or will be soon, if we all survive this conversation. Her eyes found Kestrel's across the clearing, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with the current deadly situation. McKenna, Vex called out desperately, a little help here. But McKenna was having problems of his own. While everyone's attention had been focused on the drama with Vex, Kestrel had circled around through the rocks, using paths he'd learned as a boy. Now McKenna found himself caught between 2 positions of cover, with no clear shot at either. Opponent, this is finished. McKenna, Kestrel called out. Throw down your weapons, like hell. McKenna's reply came with a spray of bullets that forced Kestrel back behind his rocky shelter. From across the clearing, Joaquin's voice rose above the gunfire. You can't win this, Kestrel. Even if you get past us, Kane has 20 men in town. You think you and the girl can fight them all? Maybe not, Magnolia replied, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. But we don't have to fight them. We just have to outlast them. What's that supposed to mean? Instead of answering, she produced a piece of paper from her dress and held it high. This is a telegram, Mr. McKenna, sent yesterday from the territorial capital. It seems someone's been feeding information to the governor about illegal railroad activities. McKenna's rifle fire stopped abruptly. That's impossible, Vex protested. You've been our prisoner since yesterday afternoon. Magnolia finished. Plenty of time for a trusted friend to send messages on my behalf. Her smile was radiant with triumph. You see, gentlemen, I wasn't working alone. I've had help from the beginning, people you never suspected. People who've been watching and recording everything. Kestrel felt a surge of admiration. Even if she was bluffing and he suspected she wasn't, it was a masterful move. Already he could see doubt creeping into the men's faces. Henrik, he realized aloud. The old rancher you visit every Tuesday, among others. Magnolia kept her gun trained on Vex while addressing the group. Henrik was a telegraph operator during the war. Very useful skills. And Mrs. Patterson at the boarding house has a remarkable memory for conversations she overhears. Amazing what people will say when they think they're not being watched. You've been playing a long game, Joaquin said, and there was grudging respect in his voice. The only game worth playing. Magnolia's expression softened slightly as she looked at Kestrel's cousin. I know you're not like them, Joaquin. You're just trying to take care of your family. But this isn't the way. For a long moment, the canyon was silent except for the whisper of wind through stone. Then Joaquin slowly stood up, his hands visible and empty. She's right, he said simply. This has gone too far. Joaquin, McKenna's voice was sharp with betrayal. They're lying. There's no telegram, no evidence. There's enough, Joaquin interrupted. And even if there wasn't, I won't kill my cousin over railroad money. McKenna's face twisted with rage. Fine, I'll do it myself. He rose from cover, rifle aimed directly at Kestrel's position. The shot that stopped him forever came from Magnolia's revolver, fired with steady hands and absolute certainty. McKenna dropped like a stone, his weapon clattering harmlessly against the rocks. In the sudden quiet that followed, Vex raised his hands higher. I surrender, he said quickly. Completely and unconditionally, Kestrel emerged from his cover, moving slowly toward where Magnolia still held her gun on their remaining prisoner. When he reached her side, she looked up at him with eyes that held shadows of what she'd just been forced to do. Are you all right? He asked softly. I will be, she replied. And he heard the steel beneath the sadness. When this is truly over. By noon, the canyon had been transformed into an impromptu courtroom. Vex sat bound against a large boulder, looking considerably less elegant than he had that morning. Joaquin had volunteered to help secure the prisoner, a gesture that spoke volumes about his change of allegiance. McKenna's body lay covered with a horse blanket, awaiting burial. Magnolia sat at Kestrel's rough table, spreading out papers and documents with methodical precision. The evidence she'd mentioned wasn't just a bluff. She had records, photographs, copies of forged deeds, and testimonies from dozens of families who'd been cheated out of their land. This is remarkable work, Kestrel said, studying a detailed map showing the railroad's illegal acquisitions. How long have you been gathering all this? Since before I arrived in Willow Creek. The territorial government received reports about land fraud months ago, but they needed someone on the ground to collect proof. She looked up from organizing papers. Magnolia Thornfield wasn't just a cover identity, she was a carefully crafted role, designed to let me move freely through the community. So you're really a federal investigator. I'm really a lot of things. Her smile held mysteries he looked forward to unraveling. But most importantly, I'm someone who believes people have the right to keep their homes and their dignity. Joaquin approached the table, head in hand, looking every inch the penitent relative. Prima, he said formally, addressing Magnolia, with the feminine form of cousin, I need to ask for your forgiveness. You have it, she replied without hesitation, but more importantly, you need to ask for forgiveness from the families you helped displace. I know. He turned to Kestrel. And you, Primo? Can you forgive a foolish man who chose money over family? Kestrel studied his cousin's face, seeing genuine remorse there. Family doesn't abandon family, Joaquin. What happens now is up to you. I want to help fix what I helped break. Joaquin's voice carried quiet determination. I know where Kane keeps his records, where he stashes his money. I know which officials he's bribed and which judges are in his pocket. That information could be very valuable, Magnolia said carefully, but it also puts you in considerable danger. More danger than staying on Kane's payroll after today. Joaquin's laugh held no humor. When he finds out what happened here, when McKenna doesn't report back, I'm a dead man either way. At least this way, I die doing something right. From his position against the boulder, Vex spoke up. You're all making a terrible mistake. Fletcher Kane has resources you can't imagine. Money, men, influence that reaches all the way to Washington. You think a few stolen documents will stop him. Not stolen, Magnolia corrected mildly. Legally obtained through proper investigative channels. And as for Mr. Kane's influence, she produced another paper from her collection. This is a warrant for his arrest, signed by a federal judge yesterday morning. He just doesn't know it yet. Vex's face went pale. That's impossible. You've been captured since yesterday afternoon. But my investigation was completed weeks ago. Yesterday was just collecting the last pieces. She folded the warrant carefully. The federal marshals should be arriving in Willow Creek right about now. The silence that followed was broken by Joaquin's low whistle of admiration. You really were playing a long game. The longest. Magnolia stood, moving to gaze out at the canyon, where she'd first revealed her true nature to Kestrel. But games end, and real life begins. Kestrel joined her at the window, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. What happens to us now when the marshals take Vex and arrest Kane? When your investigation is complete, do you go back east? That depends. She turned to face him, and he saw a vulnerability beneath her confidence. I was sent here to do a job, and that job is finished. But I wasn't sent here to fall in love with a half-Apache horse breaker who builds beautiful hidden homes and reads Spanish poetry. Is that what happened? You fell in love, completely. The word came out like a breath. The question is, what do you want to happen next? Kestrel looked around the cabin that had been his refuge for so many years. It was beautiful, peaceful, perfect for a man who wanted to hide from the world. But he was discovering that he no longer wanted to hide. I want to build something with you, he said simply. Something bigger than this canyon, bigger than just the two of us. You showed me that there are fights worth having, 'cause is worth risking everything for. Even if it means leaving this place. Especially if it means leaving this place. He took her hands in his, marveling at their softness and strength. I've been hiding here for years, telling myself I was being practical. But really, I was just afraid. Of what? Of choosing wrong. Of being rejected. Of not being enough. He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing gentle kisses to her knuckles. But you've shown me that being enough isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to fight for what matters. And what matters to you. Justice. Building something good instead of just surviving. He paused, then added with a smile. And maybe teaching you to ride like an Apache. Her laugh was pure joy. I'd like that. All of it, from across the room. Joaquin cleared his throat diplomatically, not to interrupt. But we should probably start moving toward town. If the marshals are already there, they'll want to talk. To all of us, Magnolia finished, reluctantly stepping away from Kestrel. Statements, evidence. The whole legal process. Together, Kestrel asked. Together, she confirmed, and the word held promise for more than just the day ahead. 6 months later, the town of Willow Creek bore little resemblance to the place where Kestrel Windwalker had once delivered horses in careful silence. The railroad still ran through the valley, but now it operated under federal oversight, its expansion governed by law rather than greed. The families who'd lost their land were being compensated, their properties restored where possible. And in the center of it all stood a new building, the Territorial Land Rights Office, where Magnolia Thornfield Windwalker helped displaced families navigate the legal system that had once been used against them. Mrs. Windwalker? A young voice called from the office doorway. There's someone here to see you. Magnolia looked up from the deed she'd been reviewing to find Tommy Castellanos, the 12-year-old who'd appointed himself her unofficial assistant. His eager face was flushed with excitement.